Yeah, it's going to be used for punishment and reward. Everything in society, we don't realize this, but even money itself is used as punishment and reward. Very Pavlovian. And it's the same with your entertainment. But once they make it mandatory that all transactions must go through electronic transactions, through your iPhone, and that's coming. There's so many articles out even today about that coming up from the mainstream banks. Then they can literally, as Bertrand Russell said 60 or 70 years ago, eventually they'll use a credit system. And if you are antisocial, that's a big word now across the world, especially in Britain, you're antisocial. If you're antisocial and you're not part of the communitarianism project, then they'll cut you off as a punishment until you toe the line.
Alan, stay there. When we come back, I want to get into social behavior, as they call it, where if you're rude or if you don't accept what the government's saying or you don't volunteer, you're a criminal. And they have these databases even on children all over the world now where, your data stream shows you might be mentally ill or you might be predisposed to be a criminal later. We're going to force drug you. We'll be right back with Alan Watt. Stay with us. We are back live. Alan Watt is our guest. Your phone calls are coming up. The toll-free number to join us, 1-800-259-9231. Alan's one of those few guests we can get on to talk about basically any subject. I have read hundreds and hundreds of books written by the globalists. I have read thousands of their own documents, tens of thousands of news articles, their white papers. And so that's why when I get Alan Watt on, I know he knows what he's talking about. Because he knows the exact same info I know, but from sometimes a different perspective and his own way of delivering it. And so I've been asking some of the questions here. I want him to get into whatever he thinks is most important and news that's happened lately and things that are developing and where he sees the world, what he thinks of these shootings and at the Pentagon and the kamikaze attack and the calls for censoring the web. But you were getting into antisocial behavior. They now call taking a photo of your child in the U.S. or in England at a park antisocial pedophilia. They're arresting people who take photos of their daughters in bikinis in their own pool. That's now illegal, though there's not a law. They're now demonizing, it's political correctness into every level where they're just coming after the citizenry. So, Alan Watt, continue along those lines.
Yeah, this is the Fabian technique that was also used in the Soviet system, where they believe that through scientific alteration of the mind itself, through different techniques, they can create the type of person they want. And as a form of political correctness, now they tried it out extensively in China. China was the prototype model after the Soviet Union for this more advanced form of collectivism, where everyone thinks the same, says the same things, behaves the same way, even sometimes dresses the same way, depends on the era. But they had two men working at the United Nations who dreamed up the idea to test out on China using social approval and social disapproval. And what they did, they studied the cultural history of the Chinese. And they found out that traditionally, with certain objectives in mind, depopulation was one. And traditionally, China had very often, as a matter of its culture, had killed off newborn children, especially females, if they didn't need so many, type of thing. And they thought, how can we bring this into the new system where we want to really drastically reduce their population? They actually encouraged that, as you know, and they brought in the one child per family policy. Initially, and the guys at the UN said this in one of their own statements recently, they said initially the militia had to come to drag women to the abortion clinics if they had a second pregnancy. Now they've trained the public that the neighbors themselves will drag the woman in to the clinic because they consider it as antisocial to have a second child. You're robbing the food from someone else's mouth, type of thing. You're not collective enough. And they get really angry, they'll do it. You can train the public to do this. That's what the phony
environmental movement is all about, is teaching us the pie doesn't grow, rising tides don't raise all ships. Anyone doing well is your enemy. And so you need to get into the collectivist model. And once we have collectivist health care, then we've got to tax what you eat and do because we're all paying for it. And this is the nasty trick that the collectivist paradigm uses.
Yeah, as I say, it's called social approval and disapproval. And in China, the two guys said it was such a success. These guys dreamed up, these two neuroscientists, they dreamed up this idea. They said it was such a success that they were the guys who brought in the United Nations war on smoking. And they trained the children at school to have Pavlovian responses if they saw anyone light up a cigarette 20 feet away. And I've witnessed that myself. They go into a sort of paroxysm, a spasm of coughing and waving their hands at 20 feet away. That's Pavlovian response.
Oh, yeah. Alan, I have trouble with smoking. I start it, I stop it. I've got a real problem with tobacco. And I was down at Port Aransas. My wife and kids are inside eating. I don't smoke anywhere near them a few weeks ago. And I fell off the wagon and was smoking cigarettes. And I went out on the back deck and fired up a cigarette. And a woman in the parking lot, no exaggeration, had to be 40 feet away. I just lit the cigarette and she starts waving her hands, coughing, and freaking out and runs over and says, "Your cigarette is hurting me." I mean, this is a control freak. And I said, "Hey, lady, don't worry, your police state's taking over. Don't worry." But I said, enjoy the fluoride they put in your water. Enjoy the mercury in your shots. I bet you don't have a problem with that. And then she kind of got mad and ran off.
Yeah, meanwhile, she's being sprayed every day from the aircraft, and she doesn't even notice it.
And the GMO food sterilizes all the rats they feed, but she likes that.
She liked that too, and also brings down the population by cancers up the stomach and elsewhere. But getting back to social approval, the same two guys at the United Nations said it was such a success with their no second child policy that they introduced, and they ran it. They really worked out the mechanism for it, for social approval, disapproval. Then the anti-smoking law. Then the same two guys came out and boasted they're using it now on the war on obesity. Now in Britain, they've already started to weigh your children at school.
Stay there. Let's talk about it. And yeah, then if you're 1 pound overweight, they'll take your kids, but they'll use some example of an 800-pound woman.
He's the T-Rex of political talk. Alex Jones on the GCN Radio Network.
There's hundreds of different ways that the establishment conditions us to be tattletales, to hate our fellow man. The torture porn in the movies, all the violence, the conditioning, the dividing us into all these different groups along race, religion, sex. But look at Europe. They say, we're going to ban Nazi websites. Oh, it sounds reasonable to some. Nazis are bad. Then they've got the precedent set, and now, you can't criticize the EU. You can't criticize GMO food. You can't criticize the town council. Now the White House says you can't criticize groups. And so once they set the precedent there, they expand it. They create the perception that guns are illegal with TV ads and billboards showing a picture of a revolver or a shotgun, legal almost everywhere, but a few cities like D.C. and Chicago. And they say report illegal guns. And then your neighbor's ignorant. I see every few days articles where some old guy comes out with his rifle to go to the shooting range. Neighbors call the cops. They pull him over. They go ahead and arrest him. So it's all this perception with this dumbed down population. And now they're going into the next phase. Alan's talked a lot about this, and we're going to get more into how they're conditioning us. But then I want to get into contestants turn torturers in French TV experiment and how they're duplicating. Give me a document cam shot, please. The Stanford prison experiment. And we're going to go over that experiment. In 1971, a team of researchers led by psychology professor Philip Zimbardo at Stanford University, 24 undergraduates were selected out of 70 to play the roles of both guards and prisoners in a mock prison in the basement. And they told them that we're going to randomly torture them. They were told it was real. They hired actors. And they found that the vast majority would murder people and believe they were murdering. Well, now there's all these new Hollywood movies coming out about torture. I saw another one. I think I sent you the trailer. I think it's called The Final. In fact, pull up that. It's on YouTube. It's the top video right now. Ad The Final. And the kids that aren't cool, they capture 50 of the other cool kids and they torture them and murder them, and it's a great good thing. So this is the massive conditioning. So when our neighbor's being drug away, we don't care if we're being drug away later, and our neighbor won't care when we're drug away because we're all being conditioned to it. Alan Watt.
Yes, in fact, there's a very good movie came out in Germany called The Experiment, and that was based on that particular experiment, because we're doing it in other countries too, and it works the same way wherever they do it. People really who don't know themselves, and that's the old maxim from thousands of years ago, know thyself. If you don't know yourself, you immediately get submerged into role-playing, and you adapt into the role. And sadomasochism takes over, actually, in prison guard society, between the prisoners and the wardens. And once the actors themselves, the people who take on these roles as prisoners, once you start talking back to the wardens literally react with anger. How dare you? You're subservient. We hate you because you're so compliant. You're on your knees. This is sadomasochistic behavior, and it's also used in the military. That's where they really got it from. When you join the military, the first thing they teach you is you're not a person anymore, an individual. You're part of the team. All that matters is the force. And